everybody. Thank you for attending our session today. My name is Angela Novak, and this is my wonderful colleague, Katie Lewis, and we are here today talking about windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors in a gifted classroom.
So we're going to start off by looking at some of the standards. So National Council for Social Studies Teachers has a standard that speaks specifically to cultural diversity. And I think these fit well when we think about in the gifted world as well, right? We want our teachers to have the knowledge, the capability, and the disposition to look at our schools and not only teach our students, but also understand how culture and cultural diversity comes into play. The knowledge is the understanding of the cultural piece. The capability is being able to intervene when we see things that aren't quite right. And the disposition, and that's talking about our personal selves. And we're going to talk about identity here in just a minute.
And these three standards are, number one is do no harm, do not miseducate or create negative environments. Two is welcome each child in each family. And three is that the teacher's language and interactions are important.
So we start with cultural identity of ourselves and as a teacher. And this is really important because when we go into the classroom, we bring our own perceptions and understandings with us. So whether or not we mean to, our own beliefs come into the classroom. And that's not to say you can't have your own beliefs and understanding, but we need to leave it at the door. And we need to think about how my own experiences and my own culture comes into play with my interactions with our students. So we are going to first reflect on who we are and where we are and know who we are before we can help our kiddos.
And it's really important to remember that the impact can be both seen and unseen. And that's a really crucial thing. A lot of times we think that there isn't an impact if we don't notice it.
So when we know ourselves first, we think about our own reactions to different experiences in our classroom. So when we have a student who comes into our classroom who's newly transferred, what do we know about that student? And then what is our initial reaction to it? And how can we separate our own bias in order to welcome this child into our classroom, full of respect for that child and that child's family, so that we can educate and advocate for this child in our classroom so that we are all equal. So when we think about culturally responsive teaching, there are 8 competencies that we like to think about. And this graphic sort of has them all nicely lined up for you. It's from New America. And so when we're thinking about it, we are looking at how my thoughts come into play in the classroom, but also how my actions. So how am I selecting appropriate texts for our classroom? How do I have materials in the classroom? What things am I celebrating or not celebrating? And how am I including everybody? So in this presentation, we're looking mostly at identity, and we're looking at our cultural identity as the focus here. But it is important to know that when we think about identity, culture is not all that we identify. It's one piece of the puzzle. So we are going to think about how we identify as a gender, our sexuality, racial, social, right, activities, and what happens when this identity changes. What is the impact? So if you think about an athlete, the kid who's always been a soccer player doesn't make the team, his world's crushed for a little while till he figures out that it's going to be okay. And so the same thing comes into play when we think about any of the other ways that we can identify. And as a gifted teacher, we want to make sure that we are recognizing this and helping our children process through these.
One of the things that we think about in terms of giftedness and identity is thinking about all of the different ways that giftedness is processed by the students. There was a study by Coleman and Cross that identified that gifted students may have more internal conflict, and that the societal role as a gifted child could actually inhibit their understanding of who they are. And this is because they can have more internal conflict in their lives than other young people because of some of the advanced development that they have and the specific talents that place them sort of beyond the idea of the expectations that society holds of other peers that are similar to them. And these are some of the messages that they get. You're different. Difference is praise, but it's also criticism. And they're told that they just constantly have to perform. And not only do they have to perform, but their performance has to be outstanding. Why are you having difficulty understanding? You're supposed to always achieve. You're supposed to be really good. You are what you achieve. And without having that achievement, what are you? And then on top of that, there's also the cultural identity aspects that go on to that. And we've heard examples of this. I've heard students express this to me as well. Why aren't you good at math? You're Korean. This cultural expectation. You're in the gifted program and you're not good at math. I don't understand. And so then there's the giftedness plus the cultural expectation that has the really the dual effect of identity and identity confusion. And so these messages and the anxiety and stress that these messages place on the students really impacts that identity development. And Katie, I know you had some examples you shared before with some of the students that you had in Texas in terms of societal expectations in going to college and
Yeah, so I worked in Texas for a while, and I had several female students who were coming back to school to become teacher educators, and they made several comments multiple times about how grateful they were that their husbands were allowing them to come to school, because that wasn't something that was of the norm. And so this is one example of kind of that cultural expectation that's been imposed onto this group of ladies, whereas, I would have been like, I can do what I want. My husband doesn't give me permission for things like that. But
sorry, I was trying to mute while the garbage truck is going by.
no, we couldn't hear it.
And as we move beyond thinking about in our classrooms, and the topic, our main topic today is infusing anti-bias work and anti-racism work in addition to culturally responsive work into our curriculum. I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by anti-racist and even into abolitionist teaching. And one of the best descriptions that I use of anti-racist teaching is an example that Beverly Daniel Tatum who uses, and so I share this example, is of the people mover at the airport. And to me, it just makes it really, really clear in terms of thinking about what is an anti-racist. And so you're at the airport and you're on this people mover, or walking escalator, I think is another word for it. And so you get on and you're moving, and some people get on and they are, just making time, they're in a hurry. And so they get on the people mover that's already moving them. But then in addition, they're still going to walk, and they're going to walk forward, and they're going to stride to their gate. And so I call it gate K, or and so they're actually racist, and they're moving forward. They're already in motion, and they're continuing to move forward. And so that's an active racist. And some people get on and they just hang out, and they're not actively moving towards racism, but they're not actually doing anything to stop racism. They're not actively trying to change the system. They're not speaking out against it. If they see something, they don't say something. They're just along for the ride. And so whether they want to move towards racism or not, whether they feel they're a racist or not, they're still getting off the escalator at gate K with the active racists. So that's the I'm not a racist pool, where you don't feel like you're racist, but you're not actively doing anything against it. And a lot of people, I feel like, if that sort of describe themselves as, well, I'm not a racist. I don't do anything. I don't say anything. I'm not part of that group. But if you're not actively moving against it, you're still going to get off at gate K. An anti-racist or an abolitionist teacher is someone who maybe steps on the escalator, realizes what's happening, turns around and walks off, who goes against the grain of the traffic, who goes against, who pushes past people to get off, who, is that annoying person who says something, who points out the joke, then says, hey, that's not funny, and who actively moves against the flow of traffic to get off the people mover, to get off the escalator, and make sure that they do not reach gate K. And that's the anti-racist, that's the abolitionist teacher. And so when we talk about infusing anti-bias curriculum, and another way of looking at it is avoiding the tourist approach. And the tourist approach is when we are just going around this beautiful city and we're taking pictures, but we're not actually taking the time to really involve ourselves in the city, to really see the city in any way other than through the lens of our camera. Everything that we see is through the lens of our camera, not with our eyes and not with our heart. And so what we want is fully anti-biased and open curriculum rather than just touching on things. So a tourist approach would be, oh, well, I've developed a calendar and I've put the holidays of the year on it. And so anytime I see a holiday, oh, look, it's International Women's Day. I'm going to learn about a woman today. How exciting. Bonus, I'm going to make it a Black woman. I'm going to hit two birds with one stone. That is tourist approach at its best or at its worst. And so, no, we want to infuse, we want to know that this is a really effective anti-bias curriculum in which children have self-awareness, confidence, family pride, race pride, and positive self-identities, that children have comfort and joy, and recognize human diversity and differences and caring, and understand that it's good to talk about differences, that it's not shameful, that if someone says, oh, your skin is really dark, that's something that we have a conversation about, not hide and say, shh, we don't say that. That students recognize unfairness, and that there's languages that explain the words of unfairness, and they understand that these things hurt. But that they're empowered to have the skills to act with others, or act by themselves against prejudice and against bias. And that is all built into our curriculum that we work towards serving our students with. And so the title of this presentation is Curriculum as a Window, a Mirror, and a Sliding Glass Door. And that comes from work by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. I had someone calling on my phone and it says Smith, and so I said the wrong name, I apologize. And there's another article that is referenced on the bottom. That's by Emily Stile, but Rudine Sims Bishop is the originator of the work. But these points about eyesight, insight, contextual, reflect, and reveal are from the article that's listed on the bottom. And you can see the cartoon on the left, which is again from this article. She mentions the cartoon, and you can see Snoopy going through this process about remembering that beauty is skin deep, and then thinks fur deep, and then thinks feather deep. And one thing that we think about is how curriculum functions, and that Emily Stile in the article talks about the difference between eyesight and insight, and that students don't acquire knowledge in the abstract, but that learning is personal, and that it never takes place in a vacuum. It's always very contextual, and that curriculum needs to function as all of these things. And this is, again, what Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop originally says, is that you have to look at curriculum as a window outside, as a mirror to yourself, and that literature in particular acts as a sliding glass door, that all you need is your imagination, and you can walk into the world of literature and all of a sudden you're there. And that's again, from Rudine Sims Bishop, talking about how the power of literature and the power of books to allow students to explore the world and explore themselves and see themselves. And so that's one of the aspects of culturally responsive curriculum and literature, and the power of having literature in our classrooms that really allows students to see themselves and then to see outside of the world. Oops, sorry. It's already queued up here. Oh, wait.
We're going to
sorry.
watch a short clip about the danger of a single story. Angela's just getting our tech side up and running.
Yeah, I realized I had to do a different share.
So our image here on the left is of an apple with a mirror behind it. And so the idea here is if you look at the front of the apple, all you see is the part that's damaged and been eaten and torn away. But if you're able to see the whole picture and be able to see it from multiple sides, you'll see that the back of the apple is still very fresh and ripe and full of beauty. And so we want to make sure that when we're working with our students, we can see all sides of the story.
I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer, and when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kind I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I'd never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. But things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books. But because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Lai, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized.
All right, so here, this is a really amazing TED Talk that if you haven't seen the entire thing, we highly, highly recommend that you do. It's just, like I said, a truly wonderful TED Talk. We do not want to spend 19 minutes out of our session showing it to you. So we chose just the first 2.5 minutes, but it goes along with the graphic of the apple and the danger of the single story. And so As you are at home and watching this at your leisure, we invite you to pause and reflect on what those two have go together, and windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and to think about all of these metaphors together as you can pause, and we'll pretend you've paused and just keep going as we move into how to put all of this together. So a tool that we use is the Banks framework for cultural competency. And this is really just a standard in the education field. And the different layers here go through the different aspects of cultural competency within curriculum. And really where we want to be is in the transformative and the social action. So you can see the arrows here that we've added, that we really want to be here. And what we challenge is to think like, where do you see a lot of the curriculum at the school right now? The contributions level is where it's the heroes, the holidays, the discrete cultural elements. This is the tourist aspect of curriculum. The additive level, you have content, you have some concepts and themes. The perspectives are added to the curriculum, but there's no changing of the structure, and it's safe topics. So you can see there's diverse concepts, but at designated times. This is your Black History Month, what's considered to be safe topics. Level 3 is transformative. The structure of the curriculum is changed so that students can really view the concepts and understand the concepts at different levels from different perspectives. So you really have some different viewpoints that are shared, and there's a lot more discussion, a lot more creativity in terms of the teaching and the ways that we can approach the curriculum. This is sort of anti where we are in a lot of states right now with governmental action. And level 4 is social action, and students make decisions. They're really engaged in processes, and they're thinking about important social issues, and they're going to actually take action in order to help solve them. They're really learning about the process of advocacy. And this is interdisciplinary. It's really an infused approach between classes and a really thoughtful approach about student activism as well. But there's this empowerment that students feel about how they can be the change. And a lot of times there's modeling on the part of the teachers, not necessarily always working with the students on their advocacy and their activism, but that students see the teachers at their level of activism and advocacy as well. So that's that modeling of, this is what I'm doing as a teacher, and this is how I work in my sphere of influence. So these are some different characteristics that you can see. This is from Donna Ford, 2006 article. And these are some different cultural characteristics and teaching strategies that go along with meeting the needs of gifted students that have cultural characteristics that are that have gifted characteristics that fit their cultural characteristics, that sometimes may be a little bit different than what teachers typically think of when they think of gifted characteristics. And so verve in particular is one of my favorite to think of, because this is what I think of when I think of a gifted Black student with Black joy just coming out of their fingertips, and movement and verve, and just living their intellectual ideas through their body. And it's what some teachers would say, oh, that kid's just got ADHD, that kid can't sit still, that kid is just driving me crazy, kind of thing. And so it's sort of one of these some of these characteristics are things that can cause gifted kiddos to get into trouble versus having their gifts recognized. And so these sample teaching strategies are on the right-hand side. And so if you can match the teaching strategies to the manifestations of the gifts, you've really got a good fit there. And this one, this is actually using that, what we just talked about, the Banks framework, and it combines with Bloom's taxonomy. And this is Donna Ford's work, who we just referenced. And you can see at the bottom that this is a clip from her website, but it's from the work in multicultural gifted education. But this matrix, and Shelley Fraser Trotman Scott has a great article on how to use this matrix in differentiating and in writing curriculum for gifted students. And you can find that article on Donna Ford's website. And so it's a free download on Donna Ford's website. It's a Gifted Child Today article. And so what this does is it combines Bloom's taxonomy right here on the top. And it takes Bloom's taxonomy, and then it combines those Banks levels that we just talked about there on the side, and really where you want to be. And it's nicely color coded, so you can see yellow is our happy area because yellow is a happy color. And so yellow is the happy area down here. So ideally in these, for our gifted culturally responsive curriculum and anti-racist curriculum, we want to be in, so for these cell descriptions right here, we want to be in this area where students are critiquing social and cultural issues and seeking to make change. Students are required to and can create a product based on their new perspective or the perspective of another group. They can create a plan of action to address social and cultural issues, and they're seeking change. So these 6 boxes are ideal, both for the higher levels of Bloom taxonomy and for the higher levels of the Banks culturally responsive curriculum. And then I think, Katie, did you want to close us out on the culturally responsive equity-based Bill of Rights?
So this Bill of Rights was created by several of the leaders in the field of gifted education, based on the idea that we have our Bill of Rights for, thinking about what we can do in society and what things should be allowed for us. And that gifted kiddos, we know gifted curriculum, there's a lot of policy and procedures that we can't control, but we can control the Bill of Rights. And so when we think about our gifted kids in the classroom, our gifted students of color have their own Bill of Rights. So when we're thinking about their rights as far as curriculum and instruction, right, it is their right to have culturally relevant curriculum and instruction, right? Things that are rigorous in nature and that are authentic, that go beyond just this, the tourist approach where we're just, celebrating this holiday or that holiday and then moving on. It needs to be meaningful. Their views can be encouraged and should be honored and not silenced. So, and as a teacher, we should not only teach this ourselves, but I would encourage you to have this Bill of Rights posted in your classroom so that the students can see it and they can start making this help them shift through their understanding of their own identities so that they can be stronger and, really own their giftedness and their culture and be proud. This one is the second piece of it, where it's technically the 7th, but it's the social emotional piece of this. So here we're looking for, this interaction, but also thinking about that, what happens when I fail? Is it okay not to be the best at this? Can I make a mistake? And so you have the right to do that, and it's okay, and you have a right to advocate for yourself when things aren't going quite the way they should be. So we hope you're enjoying our presentation.
Yeah, and we thank you for enjoying the virtual aspects of NAGC. This was supposed to be a live, an in-person session, but we apologize for pandemic circumstances, and hope you enjoy having access to this for several months post NAGC. And thank you again for tuning in, and sorry we weren't able to be there in person. Have a great day.